Let us pray. As Canadians and as Albertans, we give thanks for the precious gifts of freedom and peace which we enjoy. As members of this Legislative Assembly, we rededicate ourselves to the valued traditions of parliamentary democracy as a means of serving our province and our country. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports.
Speaker, I would like to table the annual financial statements for the year ending March 31st, 1986 for the Glenrose Rehabilitation Hospital.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Section 52 of the Universities Act, I wish to file with the Assembly the report of inspection for the year 1985 of the laboratory, animal care, and facilities of Alberta universities.
Solicitor General's reference of Thursday last to the alleged dictatorship in Chile, I would like to table 3 copies of a September 1986 report by Amnesty International giving substance to that allegation, to put it extremely mildly, so that the Honourable and Learned Minister can perhaps come to a different conclusion about the propriety.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table the response to question 131.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to table, on behalf of my colleague, the Minister of Advanced Education, the Lethbridge Community College Annual Report for the year ending June 30th, 1985, and as well, on behalf of my colleague, the Minister of Advanced Education, the copies of the Fairview College Annual Report for the year ended June 30, 1985.
Introduction of special guests. Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Sir, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct this question to the Minister of Energy. Mr. Speaker, as this is probably the last question period of the session, we'll attempt to again get some information from the Minister, especially in view of the fact that the population of Fort McMurray has declined by 2,366 people over the last year. What specific proposal has the government presented to the federal government regarding their investment in tar sands expansion?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member knows, I've indicated a number of times the proposal that we have put before the Federal Minister of Energy, which we've referred to as a stabilization plan, and officials, both our government and in Alberta here from the Departments of Energy and Treasury have met with federal finance and federal energy officials this past week. And once they've reported to their federal officials or federal ministers, and I've completed briefings here, we'll see where to go. That particular proposal, Mr. Speaker, as I've indicated last week to the media when questioned on this, shows no distinction between conventional oil and synthetic oil. So that if the particular stabilization plan is approved by both levels of government, we're suggesting that there be no distinction between the two, and thus benefits for those companies that are doing work in the heavy oil or in the oil sands area. But other than that, Mr. Speaker, I have not made any specific proposals on the oil sands to the federal government.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when we questioned the Premier, he indicated that there had been some talk in regarding especially the Fort McMurray area dealing with the tar sands. The minister is saying that there is not a specific proposal dealing with tar sands that they're talking with the federal government, and that's clear. It's different from the Premier said.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think it's different at all from what I understand the Premier said. The proposal that we put before the federal government, as I indicated, is a proposal that would apply to the expansion of Syncrude if they so saw fit to use the funds, and applying equally to synthetic and conventional oil.
Well, supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. In dealing with a proposal to deal with tar sands, is this government looking at some sort of equity involvement on behalf of the provincial government?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm certainly not going to comment on any specific proposals that have been presented to me with respect to any further ideas on what can be done to assist the developments in the heavy oil and the oil sands area, other than to say that certainly we've had discussions with some of the companies on what they see their role being played in the future, and also on a more general level with the overall energy situation in terms of where prices are going to go and the viability of certain projects in their minds.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it seems that other governments in Canada know what we're proposing, and companies know what we're proposing, but we as legislators aren't allowed to know this, or the people of Alberta. I find that very curious, Mr. Speaker. But my question having to do, saying this is the last question period, and another aspect of energy, is what is the minister's best estimate of the amount our natural gas royalty revenue will decline as a consequence of last week's Western gas marketing deal? Is it, in fact, around the $70 million range or higher?
As I indicated last week, Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'm having difficulty finding this a supplementary to the oil sands situation, but he being such a fine man, I'll respond to any questions that he puts forth. The agreement that took place this past week with Western Gas Marketing and the distributor companies or distribution companies in central Canada, Ontario, and Quebec has been presented to the producers. And those producers have 2 weeks to make up their minds as to whether or not they accept that particular agreement. And as I indicated, I think the last time I was in the House here, we are assessing that particular agreement and certainly do not want to influence the producers in terms of how they should react to it, other than to say that the discount into the residential market was less than what a number of people in the industry and if I recall in this House had predicted as what might happen with respect to that residential market should deregulation take place on November the 1st. We are assessing the financial implication, and it's difficult because obviously if we don't sell our gas in a market that's competitive with other sources of energy, we're not going to get revenues from lack of sales. So in order to compete, we have to see what, well, we have to compete with fuel oil and coal and electricity and these other sources of fuel. And if we're going to keep our prices up too high, then obviously we're not going to get any sales and thus no revenue.
Member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, if I may be allowed to bring back the minister to the original topic of tar sands, I'm sure as he is aware, two types of tar sand, the open pit and the in situ. The in situ, Mr. Speaker, of course, involves the economy of Bonnyville, St. Paul, a good deal of northeast Alberta. Has he worked out any financial package as these areas are suffering cutbacks in population also and loss of jobs? Has he worked out anything that is anywhere comparable to the aid that he's contemplating giving the Syncrude project? Will he be contemplating the same type of aid or program to get heavy oil and tar sands underway in the rest of northeast Alberta?
Well, there's no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that the future or security of supply for this country is extremely important. And with respect to that is the oil sand development and the heavy oil development in northeast Alberta. And having just returned from meeting with my provincial colleagues from across the country, it was very gratifying to find that every single minister across this country supporting their premiers in terms of recognizing the importance of our heavy oils and oil sands in the future needs of this country. And in that respect, we've asked the federal minister to meet with us to discuss different ways in which we can develop our non-conventional sources of oil. I say non-conventional because certainly as prices tend to rise, it'll be the conventional sources where investments will be made initially, simply because of the marketplace. But we feel very strongly that Husky Upgrader and other projects in eastern and northeastern Alberta certainly do need to proceed in terms of meeting the nation's energy needs of the future.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Supplementary to the Minister of Energy, or possibly he may wish to refer this, Mr. Speaker. Would the Minister have information which would confirm the number of persons that were actually laid off, other than by attrition or early retirement, is approximately 300 persons in the situation that he has just been responding to?
I am not sure what who the 300 employees are that the honourable member is referring to. Maybe if he could clarify it further for me.
Mr. Speaker, there was comment made earlier in the question period to a number, some 2,000 or more. I would ask if the minister is aware that the Suncor company has had 300 persons or less involved in any layoff procedure.
I don't recall the numbers with respect to the Suncor downsizing, Mr. Speaker. If the number 2,000 was mentioned, my recollection would be that would be too high.
Second main question, Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to designate my second question to the member from Edmonton Highlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to address my question to the Minister for Social Services. Mr. Speaker, the Edmonton Food Bank, which has its main depot in my constituency, announced last week that it will have to reduce its hours of operations for serving individual Edmontonians in need. Now, the food bank has always stated that, in fact, as its participant in voluntary solutions to certain crises, that it would only be a temporary and band-aid solution. I wonder what steps the minister is now taking to ensure that people previously served by the food bank and its affiliated agencies are able to acquire these services elsewhere.
Mr. Speaker, there has been a number of meetings over the last several months between senior staff, in fact the Deputy Minister and others from the Department of Social Services and the Edmonton Food Bank, and also, for the Honourable Member's information, the Calgary Food Bank. Those meetings have resulted in some clarification of, at least in some situations, why we had the tremendous use of the food bank, and partially we responded by providing information and additional social workers so that claims could be processed faster. It was obvious that many people weren't aware of the emergency services that were available through social services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary question. I wonder if the minister is giving any consideration to another measure, specifically increasing social allowance payments so that the approximately half of the Edmonton Food Bank clients might have a reduced need for seeking out that service.
Mr. Speaker, it is our judgment that in terms of the allowance presently available, which is the highest in Canada, that it is adequate. It is not, as I have said so often publicly, not an allowance that allows for any frivolities of any kind, but we believe with the basic allowance that is in place and also the various extra allocations for special family needs and so on, that it is adequate for food, clothing and shelter.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Then I wonder if the minister would indicate that the views that she's just expressed on behalf of government as policy are those expressed to her or her delegates to meetings from the inner-city agencies, such that they're no longer requesting any increases in social allowance payments for the clients that they're trying to help serve?
Mr. Speaker, the Edmonton group has in fact expressed their opinion that social allowance rates could be higher and has asked for additional information from us. The Calgary people, for whatever reason, seem to be in a somewhat different situation. The last report that I had, the usage of the food bank in Calgary had declined, where in fact in Edmonton it has increased. The factors that have made that happen, I am not able to ascertain at this point in time.
Well, final supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I wonder then if the minister will report on now on the request from her department to the voluntary private agencies in the inner city with respect to their budgetary submissions being in the 5 to 10% reduction area for next year. Is that actually an official request from the department at this time?
Mr. Speaker, absolutely. The absolute unequivocal answer that I want to give is that there has been no request of the agencies who have contractual or other arrangements with us for a 5 or 10% reduction. There are, in the normal course of affairs, always contractual negotiations going on. The negotiations are such that we negotiate for specific services and the costs associated with those services, and we have not attributed specific numbers nor asked for any reduction.
Supplementary, Edmonton Goldbar.
Mr. Speaker, again to the minister, if the 5 to 10% is not coming off on these services, can the minister tell us where it is? Because so much of the allocations from the department go to private non-profit agencies who serve exactly the same constituency.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member for Goldbar, when phrasing her question, seemed to take for granted that there would be an automatic 5 or 10% cut in budgets. And I think that if the honourable leader of the Liberal Party is also motioning, and I appreciate his gestures. But, Mr. Speaker, with respect to social services, while it is very important for us to understand what the various scenarios would be if, in fact, you had a cut right across the board, I am concentrating in respect of our particular department because so much of the service is demand-driven and therefore by statute and other regulations must be provided. We are concentrating on the administrative end.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon, Leader of the Liberal Party, main question.
Mr. Speaker, my questions today are to the Treasurer, or I'm sorry, to the Minister of Energy. I do have trouble. Over the last several days, the Energy Minister has met with the provincial ministers, as he's outlined. Federal and provincial have also met recently discussing proposed short-term stabilization plan. The federal representatives are reported as having indicated that elimination of the PGRT has exhausted the federal government's intention to help the oil and gas industry. Now, did the provincial energy ministers give an undertaking to help financially the federal government in that stabilization program?
Mr.
Neil, give the same answer.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think I had attended the meeting the honourable member was referring to, because his conclusions about what happened at a meeting he described is not the same conclusions that resulted from a meeting that I attended in Banff for 3 days with federal, provincial energy ministers and also mines ministers. At that particular meeting, Mr. Speaker, we spent 1 day discussing the security of supply problems of the future by presenting 2 ministers from the territories and other provinces information that would show that possibly as early as 2 years from now we will be net importers of oil, crude oil in this country, and that this has particular significance to the producing provinces in this country. And as a result of that 1 day meeting, we issued a communique outlining the unanimous agreement on the part of all ministers and territorial representatives of this concern, and also a telex to the federal Minister of Energy, Mines and Resources, Honourable Marcel Mass, indicating that provincial ministers producing and consuming provinces want to meet with him as soon as possible to review the options that are in place to assure this country of a security of supply in the future. And in that regard, Mr. Speaker, I would like to file copies of the communique and of the copies of the telex sent to the federal minister.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, I have not seen the documents, but I'll bet you $1 to donuts that doesn't mention financial help there. But can I go on? Now, I've carefully crafted this question, Mr. Speaker, so I have spent a lot of time on this question. It is very careful, and it will not allow the minister to skip around. Now, will the minister pick one of the following based on the latest information? We are going to have a stabilization program regardless of federal participation. Or B, we are not going to have a stabilization program. C, we don't have the slightest idea what we're going to have.
Honourable member, the Assembly enjoys what has now occurred, but question period is not a matter of multiple choice. The member for Westlock Sturgeon has raised 3 questions. That exhausts all of his supplementaries. So if the Minister of Energy would like to respond to the 3, then that's his.
A, B, or C. Well, Mr. Speaker, there was no discussions with the provincial ministers at Banff of a stabilization plan. All the ministers there are aware of the fact that we have a proposal before the federal government at this time. In fact, Saskatchewan and British Columbia are involved in the discussions that we're having with the federal government. And as I indicated to an earlier question, we have had officials meeting on that particular proposal this past week, and they are reporting back, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Speaker, he flunked that one, but I have one. Would the government consider, would this provincial government consider a program of providing loans? Remember, this is the last day of the sitting. This is the last time you're going to hear it. To bring the price of oil up to $20 US per barrel for, say, 500 barrels a day, first 500 barrels a day.
That's an interesting proposal, Mr. Speaker, and one that we'll take under consideration.
Last supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Given the terrific lobbying power, Mr. Speaker, of the multinationals owning their various mega projects, can the minister assure the House that he's budgeting as much for the stabilization plan as the government is budgeting for as budgeted in the past for the Husky upgrader and for the tar sand plants?
Again, the representation I'm sure we'll consider in the course of reviewing our estimates, or our budget for the coming year.
Calgary Forest Line.
To the Minister of Energy, collapse of international oil prices is as much a disaster at the end of this session as it was in the beginning. What plans does the government have to recall the legislature in this fall to deal with this problem unless there's some sharp increase in the international price of oil?
Mr. Speaker, I think he's directing the question to the wrong person in terms of recalling the legislature. However, I would comment that it appears the only time that the honourable members refer to oil prices if there's suddenly a drop. And when prices start wandering up from $10, $12 a barrel up to $16.50 a barrel, absolute silence over there, not a word. But the minute it comes back down to $12, $14, $15, or back from the 16.5, you start seeing smiles on their faces, and they start asking questions about the collapse of the world oil prices. They just seem to love the gloom and doom scenario. But, Mr. Speaker, in terms of oil pricing, ever since the 2-month agreement of OPEC occurred, and the fact that the first month has gone by with almost all the countries adhering to their production quotas, the optimism of the forecasters is much greater than what's evident across the floor of the NDP party.
The Leader of the Representative Party, followed by the member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Agriculture. A recent study put out by the American Medical Association has concluded that 2,4-D is one of the most widely used herbicides in Canada and also the United States, but it creates a 6-fold excess risk of contracting lymphatic cancer. Could the minister indicate, and as well the federal government is concerned about it and I understand possibly they're going to change the rules, could the minister indicate the provincial government position with regards to this matter, and will the government be supporting the removal and the replacement by other chemicals, or what action is being planned, if any?
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member is aware, this comes under the jurisdiction of the federal government as it relates to licensing of pesticides. It is presently under consideration. We will make representation, and I appreciate the thoughts of the honourable member prior to making those representations to the federal government, but it does come strictly under federal jurisdiction.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question with regards to the spraying of Furadan across the province of Alberta and excessively in southern Alberta. Could the minister indicate what has been the results of recent studies by the department and whether Furadan could possibly be taken off the market?
Again, Mr. Speaker, if Furadan was to be taken off the market, it would be taken off the market by the federal government because the federal government does license these pesticides. I can indicate to him, too, that as he is aware and referred to, we have done extensive studies. We do not have the complete reports of all these studies as of yet, but to those who are attempting to indicate that because of our subsidy to the grasshopper control program that we implemented on June the 11th, that there were some cause for concern prior to that date as to bees dying.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question. With regards to the bee producers in the province of Alberta, is there any consideration being given towards moratorium, limited use of Furadan, or restricted use of Furadan in terms of areas adjacent to bee producing industries? Has the minister made any decision with regards to that?
What we have done, Mr. Speaker, in a very extensive way was notified both the farming population and our honey producers of some of the possible dangers as it relates to Furadan so that they would exercise extra caution themselves as to release of bees and whatnot. But as the honourable member is aware, and as I indicated earlier, the licensing and approval of pesticide usage in Canada falls under federal jurisdiction, and in the event that the honourable member has any conclusive proof that he would like us to pass on his behalf to the federal government, we're more than happy to do so.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, could the Minister indicate whether final arrangements have been made with regards to compensation for losses due to Furidan for the beekeepers of Alberta?
As I indicated 2 questions ago, when we announced our program, I believe it was either June the 11th or June the 12th, as it related to offsetting 50% of the cost of spraying for grasshoppers, a number of individuals have suggested that because of this program, we should assume responsibility as it relates to those bees that did die and the loss of honey production. We have proof to the extent that bees did die prior to the announcement of that program. So we can't attribute our program to the difficulties that the honey producers have faced. But I can share with the honourable member that it is under active consideration by our Associate Minister, who is responsible for hail and crop insurance, and we've made representations to federal responsibilities to the extent that we feel that lossage should be covered under hail and crop insurance, because there is no conclusive proof that our program was responsible for the death of the bees.
Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister, given that it's a federal responsibility on ruling on the chemicals. However, as you know, we have experimental stations and many other fact-gathering facilities in Alberta on these type of problems. Could the Minister take the leadership or ask his department to take some leadership into reporting to the federal government, because our findings might be different than what they're finding in Ontario elsewhere, to give a definite Alberta slant to what the result of the use of chemicals are here in Alberta?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we did take that leadership when we announced the grasshopper program, whereby in conjunction with that program we indicated we were going to conduct environmental studies, even though it was licensed by the federal government. We have not completed, to the extent that I would like them completed, those studies, and when they are completed, we are going to share the results with our federal counterparts. But as the honourable member is aware, we did initiate environmental studies. We've also initiated an informational procedure to make the bee producers aware of some of the concerns that might be developed in the event that Furidan is used.
Supplementary, Stettler.
To the Minister, has his department done any studies on the effect or potential effect of what the banning of the use of Furidan or 2,4-D would be to Alberta food production and prices?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not quite sure of that myself. I don't believe so, but there has been concern expressed by those who presently do have alfalfa crops and a number of other groups. In the event that we did ban Furidan or 2,4-D, it would cause them additional expenses to produce their crops.
Member for Vegreville.
For the Minister, Mr. Speaker, losses experienced due to Furidan spraying go far beyond the loss of honey this year by beekeepers. Producers have lost entire hives, which reduces the number of hives they have to overwinter and to claim crop insurance on. Does the department have any plans to compensate bee producers for their loss of hives in the same way that we compensate grain producers for damage by ducks or geese, and livestock producers for damage by coyotes?
Well, as I indicated to the honourable member for Little Bow, and I'm happy to repeat it, the Associate Minister who is responsible for hail and crop insurance and myself have had communication with our federal counterparts with the hopes of making sure that that loss is covered under hail and crop insurance.
Member for Edmonton Strathcona, followed by the member for Clover Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Community and Occupational Health. It concerns the safety of Gainer's meats. Meat products from the Gainer's plant in Edmonton have been found responsible for 3 cases of food poisoning in Atlantic Canada. We must be concerned, Mr. Speaker, not only for the health of consumers, but for the confidence Canadians have for Alberta food products. What assurance is the Minister able to give Albertans that products leaving the Gainer's plant are safe for consumption?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the information that I have available to me suggests that the problem with respect to that meat in Atlantic Canada was caused through the shipping of that meat and suffered some extremes in temperature such that the meat arrived in Atlantic Canada with the problem having taken place only during transportation.
Before the dispute, Mr. Speaker, there were 20 inspectors on the job overseeing the production of 1,000 experienced employees, and there are now some 14, we understand, reviewing the product of some 400 unqualified workers. In view of the ratio of inspectors to unqualified workers properly being 1 to 10 or something like that, what concern has the Minister expressed to the Federal Department over the safety of products that are put in jeopardy?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the quality of that meat has continued to be monitored by those inspectors, and the monitoring continues, the inspection continues, and no reports have come to our attention, Mr. Speaker, to cause us any alarm, and we feel that inspection is appropriate at this time.
Mr. Speaker, the federal requirements currently allow...
Honourable Member, the difficulty of the line of question is federal responsibility and provincial jurisdiction. Please take that into account with the balance of the supplementary questions.
Yes, Speaker, I've tried to. Since the current departmental rules of the Federal Department of Health, admittedly, now permit food processors to have the food processors themselves, their own employees, affix a Canada-approved stamp, is the Minister confident that this privilege is not being abused at gainers currently in respect of food products destined for Albertans? And if that confidence is there, what are the grounds for it?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry. I heard one part of the question with respect to gainers and inspection, and then I heard something about product moving to Alberta. Perhaps the honourable member could differentiate the two and maybe just ask one question.
Strathcona, clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Simply that the Minister must have concern, I submit, in respect of the safety of the products for Albertans. What confidence has the Minister in that?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as you rightly pointed out, this inspection is a matter of federal jurisdiction. If the honourable member has a concern or has a particular problem that he wishes to bring to our attention with respect to a problem here in Alberta, I would accept that, Mr. Speaker, and take it and do some careful research to see if there is a problem. But I could tell all honourable members now, Mr. Speaker, that no problem has come to our attention, and therefore we are not alarmed or at this current time concerned about the inspection at that plant.
Question.
Final point, Mr. Speaker, that I would wish to put to the Minister is that inspectors have indicated that they only inspect at the point of slaughter and do not inspect the processed products. What use has the Minister made of any powers of his own to ascertain the safety of the products or to order veterinary services to take further steps?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member continues to dwell on an inspection in an area that is of federal jurisdiction. And again, if he has concerns, I'd ask him to bring to my attention.
Answers the matter. Member for Clover Bar, followed by the member for Calgary-Buffalo. Crafted, I'm sure. Supplementary, Westlock Sturgeon.
To the Minister, the federal government said or suspected that was heat-oriented, which means how it's kept in the area before marketing. Has the Minister checked whether our systems of holding that type of processed meat in the retail establishments are sufficient to make sure that the same thing couldn't happen in Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, from the information that I've been able to acquire on the matter, the answer is yes.
Member for Clover Bar, followed by the member for Calgary-Buffalo.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Minister of Economic Development, this has to do with the Government Small Business Loan Program. Can the Minister indicate if the the bankers in the province are having the same problem right across the province and trying to get through to the department to get a number for the loan applications, because we've had many complaints, Mr. Speaker, that's almost impossible. Can the minister indicate what problems they're having in the department trying to get the loans that have already been processed at the local level to the minister's department?
Mr. Speaker, we dealt, I think, briefly with this subject earlier this week in question period. Yes, the overwhelming response of the business community to the program has resulted in a far greater pressure in terms of our capacity to respond to handle the calls from the financial institutions than we had anticipated.
Mr. Speaker, I know what the problem is, but I want to know what the solution is. What is the minister doing about alleviating the problem so that the loans that are coming in from the lending institutions can be processed more rapidly?
Mr. Speaker, we had, as I'd also earlier advised, had extended hours in which the calls could be made from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. each day. We'd increased the number of telephone lines devoted to incoming calls in order to process them as quickly as we possibly could. Other than that, in order to have a balance throughout the province in terms of opportunities of businesses that are spread throughout the province, to have an even opportunity to have access to registration of their loan, we weren't aware of any additional measures that might be taken other than those that we have taken.
Mr. Speaker, does the minister have any idea at this time if the loans that are coming in, if the program is going to be able to fulfill 30% of the wishes of the businessmen, 50%, 100%? Does the minister have any projections at this time if the program is going to be adequate or under or oversubscribed?
Mr. Speaker, I can't be precise, but as of 10 o'clock last night, the computers in the department, which are recording the approved loans, totaled $161,957,596 had been processed through the computers of approved loans through the financial institutions. I'm still not certain as to whether or not we will be able to accommodate the huge demand for this excellent program, but I need to have a few more days to be able to determine that, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, to the minister, is there some, well, will there be some attempt to possibly prorate the size of the loan if the program gets oversubscribed, say 150%? Is the top limit still going to remain the same as it is, or is it going to have to be downgraded?
Our preliminary, the honourable member, all members are aware that the maximum size of loan is $150,000. Our preliminary indications are that the average loan that's been approved is about $90,000, which is a reasonable level. It would be difficult for the government to change the rules in midstream, where one group of small businesses had been able to access a program under certain terms and conditions and then changing them for another group. So I would be reluctant to change the program in midstream.
Vegreville.
Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Minister, recognizing that it's just not working, people aren't able to get their applications in. Banks in Vegreville have been trying from 7 to 7 every day and not been able to get through, and I myself have tried 50 times today to phone, and it's always busy. Will the minister accept hand-delivered applications for the Small Business Term Acceptance Program?
Mr. Speaker, I think I responded to a similar question earlier from the member for Clover Bar. The difficulty in changing the manner in which the program is designed to handle applications, and we recognize the frustration that's being experienced. by the financial institutions and by the individual small business with the process, but it would create a difference in opportunity for far distant branches or communities with a different level of communication availability than for others that are, say, for example, right here in Edmonton. So I would prefer not, Mr. Speaker, to consider accepting hand-delivered applications.
Member for Edmonton Meadowlark.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Economic Development, has the department analyzed the impact of this particular program on jobs versus the impact of a Syncrude kind of project on jobs to determine whether it would perhaps be more appropriate to fund this program more and to reconsider the government's apparent urge with funding mega projects such as Syncrude?
Mr. Speaker, I don't think that that we should not consider any avenue to assist job creation in this province. As the honourable member knows, that one of the priorities of the government with respect to economic development is small business. But it is also important in terms of job creation and energy self-sufficiency to look at expanding our capability of meeting Canada's requirements for energy. Both are very important, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
Member for Calgary-Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Honourable Minister of Energy, as I talk, the provincial drilling incentives program has been ineffective, employment is increasing, and it's becoming increasingly clear that we need not just a short-term but a long-term stabilization program. And by calling for a federal provincial meeting on security of supply, the Minister of Energy has in effect admitted that the government's policy of deregulation is not working. Is the Minister, by supporting the federal provincial meeting, calling for national policies which provide long-term stability for oil and gas prices and commensurately for provincial revenues so that the oil and gas industry does not die by the free market?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we were all over the country on that particular one, from our incentive programs to stabilization to deregulation, and the honourable member can draw whatever conclusions he wishes with regard to the impact or the take-up on the incentive programs. The reason simply being that the cash flow loss in the industry has been such that most companies were not in a position to be able to take advantage of those programs. However, as the programs are drawing to an end, we do see an increase in the take-up. With respect to the meeting discussions with the federal minister, we've requested with all the provincial ministers, we want to address the issue of security of supply and discuss all the options that are available to this country to address that particular question and the feasibility, the pros and cons of each of those options. And I think it's very significant that we have 10 provincial governments in this country and 2 territories that want to sit down with the federal government and to look at options and are serious and concerned about the problem of security of supply. And so I think it's a significant start in dealing with a difficult problem.
Time for question period has expired. Might we give unanimous consent for this line of questioning to be completed, provided we have supplementary questions and answers that are quite brief? Opposed? That's a matter of opinion. Member for Calgary-Buffalo.
I'm underwhelmed, Mr. Speaker, by the directness of the minister's answer. Would the minister please advise the House, as a mathematician and a logician, how he can state that the government supports a totally free market in energy at the same time as it is proposing a stabilization plan to the federal government and calling for a conference on security of supply?
Mr. Speaker, I'm restraining any temptations to sort of get back at the guy. from Calgary, Buffalo. We're sitting in this legislature, Mr. Speaker, not solely as mathematicians and logicians. We're sitting here as politicians and representatives of the people in terms of dealing with their problems. And the main problem we're dealing with here is security of supply. The proposal we have before the federal government right now on with respect to stabilization is a separate set of discussions than the one we're proposing with the federal government in dealing with security of supply. Alberta, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia are involved in discussions with the federal government in looking at a proposal that we presented to the federal government. And as I've indicated previously, this particular proposal is aimed at a particular segment of the energy industry. The removal of the PGRT will have an impact on a certain segment of the energy industry. We've indicated many times that more needs to be done to address the short-term problems, but also we need to have planning with respect to the longer-term problems of security of supply.
Well, the minister picks up getting all over the map very quickly. Will the minister please answer how long-term planning is possible without price stability as ensured by some form of federal government program?
Well, Mr. Speaker, certainly price stability is necessary for investment to occur in our energy industry in this country, whether it be in conventional oil or in the frontiers or offshore or wherever it might be. And one of the options that is in place that we can discuss, there are many of them, would be looking at what kind of security supply could occur for North America. And in that regard, there may possibly be some positives. We don't want to look at the pros and cons of a North American oil price or an import duty on offshore crude. That is just one of many options that could be reviewed in discussions with the federal government.
Speaking of the United States, Mr. Speaker, has the minister or anyone in the government talked to the federal government about commencing discussions with the United States to develop a continental oil strategy, possibly as part of an expansion of the current free trade talks?
Mr. Speaker, we've had discussions with the federal government on the matter of the North American security of supply, and we've indicated that we think it would be important for the federal government to discuss the options that are available to both countries in dealing with that particular problem. I haven't initiated any requests as it relates directly to the trade discussions.
Member for Edmonton Norwood.
Mr. Speaker, to the minister, is one of the proposals in terms of price stabilization that the government has made to the federal government have to do with the floor price and import quotas?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've indicated to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition that our particular program, stabilization program we've proposed to the federal government is such that the details we are not wanting to discuss in the public arena at this particular time.
Not sure. No. Time for question period has expired. However, there are a number of issues to be dealt with. The Minister of Social Services would like to give a response to questions asked yesterday. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a result of questions taken as notice yesterday, some of that area was covered in question period today, but I should respond to in an additional area to do with the tragedy of the late Mr. Belanger and his family, and this was raised yesterday in my absence. I wanted to say, Mr. Speaker, that this tragedy has not only affected the family, but certainly a number of very professional people in the Department of Social Services who, over time, have had a relationship with this family. And unfortunately, as happens, not only with people in the community, friends, and family themselves, the professional people, are not always able to unlock and find the key to very troubled minds. Mr. Speaker, several things were followed up as a result of that. First of all, there was apparently an allegation made that there was not follow-up in terms of seeing to that this family received proper services. And a contact was made with the Director of Student Services and the Superintendent of the Thibault Roman Catholic School Board, and they have assured our staff of a number of things. First of all, the anonymous comment was not on behalf of the school district, that the department was never advised by the school district to remove the children, and in the Director of Student Services opinion that in fact they were working with one of the best social workers that the school district has ever noted, and further, that none of them in the school district had the slightest idea that this tragedy would occur. Mr. Speaker, the department, over the course of the last day and a half, have completely reviewed the files as well as interviewing staff that have been involved, and there is no indication of any lack of follow-up. And I would also add, Mr. Speaker, that funeral expenses will certainly, though it's a small gesture, will certainly be looked after by the department, and through another department, bereavement counseling is available to the widow.
Member raised Edmonton Norwood.
Mr. Speaker, will the government, the minister in particular, recognizing that people are under a great deal of stress with the economic climate in Alberta, will the minister be reviewing caseloads for social workers to see if they're overburdened at this particular time and some of these tragedies could be averted in the future?
Mr. Speaker, I would that instances of this nature, tragedies of this nature, could be averted by simply having many more staff on hand. But unfortunately, in this case, it is not so.
The Minister of Hospital and Medical Care would like to supplement information from Thursday last.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Tuesday of this week, the honourable member from Edmonton Centre asked a number of questions relative to the funding for cystic fibrosis and made several accusations with regard to certain matters involving that. The questions about the funding can be answered as follows. Certain funds, mainly approximately $75,000 for each hospital, were transferred from the Department of Social Service to the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care at the beginning of this fiscal year. Since that time, those funds have been increased to the extent that the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care will be making available to the Alberta Children's Hospital, Calgary, this year approximately $145,000 in specific funding for the cystic fibrosis program there. But in addition to that, the hospital's global budget, which is also funded from the department, has about $51,000 in it, making a total of $196,000. The University of Alberta Hospital, $142,000 is being made available this year, with another $76,000 in the hospital's global budget, also funded by the department. The funding, which is still being provided by the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, is for salaries. In the case of the Alberta Children's Hospital, for 1.5 full-time equivalent salaries, $55,000, and at the University of Alberta, some $56,000. The subject of whether or not the salaries will be paid for directly by the Department of Hospitals Medical Care is subject to consideration in the next budget year, 1987-88. Second question involving alleged discrimination of people over 18, I would advise as follows that the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care funding as of April 1st, 1986 covers the cost of treatment for all cystic fibrosis patients which are not covered by Blue Cross or private insurance, regardless of age, and there's no discrimination whatever against people that are over 18 years of age. Third question that was raised was with regard to space at the University of Alberta Hospital at the new Walter McKenzie Health Sciences Centre, and I have contacted the administration of the McKenzie Health Sciences Centre, and they assure us that the cystic fibrosis clinic is on schedule to move into the clinical sciences building, and that patients will continue to be seen by their physician in the general clinic of the Walter C. McKenzie Health Sciences Centre until that's completed.
Senator?
I'd like to thank the Minister for looking into that, and I'll pass information on to people who have made the representations to me as well.
Thank you, Minister. The Solicitor General wishes to speak to the House with regard to an earlier sitting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to actually take this opportunity to clear the record as of my comments last Friday to the member for Edmonton Mill Woods relating to his question as to whether the Liquor Commission would cease sales of Chilean product. And as the member for Edmonton Strathcona has raised today, I inappropriately put the word alleged with the dictatorship, and rather than the alleged affect the cutoff of the sales. I noted that in the newspapers over the weekend, as well as Hansard received on Tuesday, and at that time had intended to apologize to the member for Edmonton Mill Woods. I was advised that he had gone to Chile, and as it's rumored that today or tomorrow may be the last sitting days of this session, I would like to take this opportunity to apologize to him and to the people from Chile for the inappropriate and misplacement of that particular word, and thank the House for the opportunity.
As it appears we've come to the end of question period, at least for this day, the Chair would like to make note of this following bit of legislative trivia. As of this afternoon, the Chair has handled 2,540 questions. Orders of the day, not that all matters were necessary, trivial. Carefully crafted. Orders of the day, member for Athabasca-Lac-La Bitte.